Hello, and welcome to EgyptKeyRadio's latest video. Today we're pleased to welcome Antoine Gigal during one of our stopovers in Paris. Researcher in Egyptology as well as explorer, she's been exploring Egypt from every conceivable angle for more than 20 years. She knows about all the sites of ancient Egypt, even though still closed to the public today. She wrote numerous articles and also translated many ancient Egyptian texts. You can follow her on her website, gigalresearch.com, or on her Facebook page, Antoine Gigal. Today, we will talk about the current situation in Egypt. Hello, Gigal. Hello. Thank you for granting us this interview. You've just come back from Egypt. What can you say about the latest developments over there? Well, a lot of things, but if I had only one word to talk about the situation, I would say I'm extremely proud of Egypt and Egyptians. So proud, and for what reasons? Well, for a lot of reasons, really. The main reason being they had the courage, the strength, and the intelligence to take back the freedom they had lost 2 years ago. And they even did it against the entire world. Imagine, the entire world was against them, even though they were walking on a path of justice, of truth. And this is very courageous. They managed to stand strong, and still do. And that's the most important thing, really. Very well. And so, in all of this, what role is played by the Brotherhood? Well, there has been what was called a revolution 2 years ago in Egypt. As you know, I was in Cairo at the time. And today, I will call it a coup d'etat, and not a revolution. Because 2 years ago, it was in fact the Muslim Brotherhood's coup d'etat, disguised behind an imagery that lured and appealed to the West, showing the youth taking back its freedom, etc. This was an epiphenomenon, but in fact, the Muslim Brotherhood was behind it, since the same day the revolution started, as I've already explained, as international press is discovering it. On the first day of the so-called revolution 2 years ago, high-security prisons were attacked to free Muslim Brotherhood members, among which were Mr. Morsi and others, who then came to rule over Egypt. So for me, and for many others today, it was a real but disguised coup d'etat. And on July 3rd of this year, there was a real revolution in Egypt supported by the people, and not a coup d'etat. 33 millions in the streets of Egypt. Imagine. This is unheard of in any country, and all over the world. The wish of so many people to bring down the government they had for 2 years, which, in spite of all the alarm bells ringing and the people's demands, kept on government against all odds and above all against the best interests of the Egyptian people.
À vouloir gouverner envers et contre tous, et surtout contre le bien de l'Égypte et le bien des Égyptiens.
So, in fact, the Egyptian army answered the people's cry and came to their rescue, pretty much.
Oui, en fait, le ministre de la Défense actuel, le général Sissi, était à l'époque déjà le
Yes, well, the current defense minister, General Sisi, was already defense minister back then, and he saw the path taken by the president, and he warned several times that the people's needs should be met. Unfortunately, President Morsi refused to listen to his warnings, and so this massive demonstration, 33 million, is absolutely enormous. It's unheard of in the world's history. Well, it's a beautiful testimony of the people's desire to change. Following this demonstration, and since the president and his collaborators refused to acknowledge it, well, something had to be done to overthrow him in order to lift the weight off the Egyptians' shoulders, which was
Eh bien,
considerable
il a
for 2
fallu
years.
prendre les choses en main pour les quartiers du
The army
pouvoir
is
pour que
nothing
la
like
population puisse
in other
être délivrée
countries.
de ce poids,
The army is
un
very
poids
much loved
considérable
by
qui
the
revient
people in
depuis 2 ans.
Egypt and is very
Donc l'armée en
present
Égypte,
among the
tout comme
people,
ailleurs,
and
une armée
therefore
très aimée et
is very
très
often followed by the
introduite en tête de la
population,
population.
especially because of the armed
Donc,
conflicts that
elle
took
est
place after the
largement
last
suivie
World
la
War.
plupart du temps.
So
Surtout aussi
the
à
perception
cause
of
des
the
conflits
army
armés
is
qu'il y a
very
eu
different,
après
and
la
I've
guerre
seen
mondiale.
many Westerners
Voilà.
trying
Donc
to
c'était une
apply the
conception de
same
l'armée qui est très
prejudices
différente. Donc j'ai
concerning the
vu
army to
beaucoup
Egypt,
d'Occidentaux qui
but it's
voulaient
nothing like it.
calquer les a priori que
One
l'on a
has
en
to know
Occident
in
contre
depth
l'armée
the history
et
of
les
Egypt
coller
to
à
understand
l'Égypte, mais ça n'a
that the army
rien
is
à
fully
voir. Il
integrated
faut
to the
vraiment
Egyptian
connaître
people, and it will
l'histoire de l'Égypte en
always
profondeur
be that way,
pour
no
comprendre
matter
que
what. It's an
c'est une autre
important
chose.
part of
L'armée
Egypt.
fait partie intégrante du peuple égyptien et ce sera toujours
Okay,
comme ça de toute façon.
so in the end, it's a good thing.
Bah, dans ce cas-là, oui, puisque
In
vous
this case,
savez,
yes.
malheureusement, la force
Unfortunately,
d'une
the
armée
army's
et
strength
l'arrivée
was
d'une
needed to
armée
lighten the load
pour
off
pouvoir
Egypt.
commencer
I say load because the
à
government in place for
enlever
2
ce
years was
poids qui était
blocking
sur
each and
l'Égypte.
every
C'est du poids
initiative
parce que
of
le
Egyptian civil
gouvernement qui a eu
servants
pendant 2
to
ans
further the
était un
country's
gouvernement
growth,
qui bloquait
blocking anything
toutes les
that was in
initiatives
Egypt's best
des
interest.
fonctionnaires égyptiens pour
The
faire avancer le
exploitation of
pays,
mines, for
qui bloquait
instance, the
tout ce qui
creation
était
of new companies, or
pour
the
l'Égypte, comme
restructuring
par
of
exemple
old ones.
ne
Everything was
serait-ce
blocked,
que l'exploitation des
as if
mines,
the
etc.
powers
Tout
that
était
be
bloqué,
at the
toutes les
time
nouvelles initiatives,
only
toutes les
wanted
nouvelles
to sink Egypt. So
compagnies,
this is
sociétés
what
qu'on voulait faire,
mobilized the
construire,
population,
tout était
who
bloqué.
didn't necessarily
Comme si
realize
ce pouvoir en
what was
place,
going
s'il
on
n'avait
at the
qu'un
beginning,
souhait, c'était celui que
since the
l'Égypte
government
croule.
had been elected.
Donc ça a fait
Now,
remuer beaucoup
let
de
me
gens
remind
dans la
that
population
there
qui
are
n'avaient pas
many
pris conscience de
documents
ça au
showing
départ,
this
parce que
so-called
je rappelle quand
election
même que
was
ce gouvernement
subjected
avait
to
été
much
élu.
misappropriation.
Maintenant élu, il faut qu'on mette ça peut-être entre guillemets, parce que maintenant ressortent beaucoup de choses, beaucoup de documents qui montreraient qu'il y a eu beaucoup de malversations pendant les élections.
And maybe a foreign intervention?
Plusieurs.
Well, several foreign interventions. There were several foreign interventions. But anyway, we know the history of the group holding the power. It's a group that has always been manipulated throughout history, since its inception in 1928, i.e. the Muslim Brotherhood, of course. Its history is punctuated with assassinations and co-optations from different sides, etc. At the beginning, the group formed as a response to the fear of communism during Nasser's time. So they were used in this purpose to start with, and then for other reasons. They served different causes that strengthened them, and they were thus very well financed, but for no apparent reason, since they preached a very backward and harmful version of Islam for a modern society such as Egypt, that is. Well, incidentally, it's the topic of my next question. Egypt as a regional power and as a state, well, the role played by women in Egypt is very important. And it's the feeling we get in Europe and in the West in general, is that women played a key role in this revolution to overthrow Morsi and the Brotherhood. Indeed, women played a very significant role, but this hasn't shown at all in the media, nor in the attribution of positions of power, except for a few female ministers. One must realize that Westerners have a very peculiar perception of the Egyptian women. They think it's like in Maghreb or in other countries, when in fact it is very different. The Egyptian women are queen in their households, and they play a key role in society and in their way of thinking. Therefore, women understood very quickly what was going on and urged their husbands, their sons, and their brothers to fight. So they played a more than significant role. In the demonstrations, they were on the front lines. They fought with much courage. One has to know that in the constitution crafted 2 years ago, women's status was nightmarish. They were completely denied for the first time in Egypt's history, as Egypt was always in the forefront. The avant-garde. Indeed, for women's rights and women in general, and indeed they played a key role. Now, a constitution is being rewritten and will soon be subjected to a vote, in which, at last, the established rights and benefits for women are recognized again. In my opinion, women have a very important part to play, not only culturally. Culture Minister and the Communication Minister are women, as they often are, but also in renewable energies. There's an extraordinary energy minister, and I think the future of Egypt lies in renewable energies, especially solar and wind power, as well as water power, which is very important in my opinion. I think Egypt has the potential to perform miracles. There are companies in Egypt doing a remarkable work which didn't have a say for 2 years, since entire cities can become autonomous thanks to solar energy. So it is time for all these things to materialize and make them happen. Relating to what you said earlier about Egypt being at the avant-garde, especially in the region, how is Egypt doing in terms of the economy, the politics, and so on? Even if you covered this topic extensively, saying that there had been a coup d'etat followed by a revolution, which was supported by the army. So how has the economy been doing for these past 2 years, and do you think Egypt can play and can help pull the neighboring countries out of the current crises they are in because of the different Arab Springs? But could you start by giving us your view on the economy, please? Well, of course, the economic situation is very bad, given the waste and the pillaging that took place during those 2 years. It is clear the economy is in a bad shape, but the will of the Egyptian people is very, very strong. The Egyptian resources are very strong as well. For instance, every day new gas well and oil deposits are discovered. And above all, the current temporary government has very qualified ministers to help the economy being restored and rebuild all the structures that were destroyed during those 2 years. So hopes are high, and as I was saying previously, the future is in renewable energies, and Egypt is an extraordinary platform for this. The brains and the workforce are there to achieve it, so I really have no worries about the economy. Currently, a lot of help is coming from the Emirates. Saudi Arabia gave money, Kuwait gave money, as well as other countries.
L'Arabie Saoudite a donné de l'argent, le Koweït a donné de l'argent, d'autres pays.
So real solidarity coming from Middle Eastern countries. Indeed, there was a real solidarity coming from the Emirates and others, because they don't want the same thing happening in their countries. There was very much fear, as there are Muslim Brotherhood cells all over the place, and they don't want these kinds of troubles in their countries. Therefore, a strong solidarity was thankfully developed, which allowed Egypt to move on. Let us not forget that Egypt is currently at war with terrorists in Sinai. Terrorist cells close to the Muslim Brotherhoods, such as the Hamas, which has been a subgroup of the Brotherhood for a long time, and who try to stir and bring about chaos in Egypt. So that's why they're fighting in Sinai. We have to understand that the Hamas was using and still uses Sinai, an Egyptian territory, as a rear base, namely for gun smuggling and trafficking. Now, for two, the Hamas smuggled guns into Egypt by the ton to support the Muslim Brotherhood and its coup d'etat 2 years ago. Islamic subgroups were also gun trafficking on the Libyan border. Egypt is actually surrounded by groups trying to bring about chaos to the country and to the Middle East in general, as you can see. So Egypt, for now, is the only country that clearly said no and is clearly fighting against all these groups and subgroups at the same time. So it's true, these are tough times, especially for the people and the economy, since the country is at war. People die and are wounded every day in Sinai, whether they be soldiers and jihadists. It is impressive to see that after 2 very difficult years, the country is still capable of achieving all of this with such cohesion and such strength, and of course with the help of the population, because people obviously suffered terribly. It is truly extraordinary, and one can only hope that they manage to get rid of all these groups and all these subgroups who are seeking to bring about and stir chaos in the country, and would want to do the same to us in our country. Therefore, the fact Egypt has broken free of all this and now undertakes these actions today is also something for us. It is very important to understand that. Now, you've already spoken about the economic situation in Egypt. Now, could you tell us more about the situation of the tourism sector? We know tourism has a very important role. Obviously, the situation of tourism is catastrophic, but the current minister is doing many things to restart the industry. Of course, it starts with the return of confidence in order for the people to feel safe in Egypt. And I think that within a few weeks, all will be fine for the new year. But there's already no danger for tourists, since all the touristic routes are extremely well protected. Quite simply, Egypt is still going through tough times with a curfew, with the difficult situation in Sinai. But I'm sure that for Christmas and January, the situation will be good again, and that the tourism sector really needs the tourists to come back in Egypt in order for the people in the tourism industry to work again, which represents a significant part of the population.
Le secteur du tourisme a très besoin que les gens viennent en Égypte pour refaire à nouveau retravailler tout un secteur de cette population qui est vraiment considérable pour le tourisme, bien sûr.
Well, there has been encouraging news from that point of view. Namely, the French tour operators created an ad campaign to support Egypt. Yeah, absolutely. That's to say, organized tours are very well protected. Problems are only occurring downtown and in Sinai. But apart from that, there's really no problem. And tourists carefully avoid these areas. There is thus no reason to not come back in Egypt. German tourism also did quite a few things. Yes, Thomas Cook started tours again. Yes, absolutely. There are many Germans and Chinese going. A lot of people, in fact, but obviously not the majority yet, but we'll come to it. So we know there has been tough times between the coup d'etat and the revolution. How did the Ministry of Antiquities manage through this period? Well, during these 2 years, there were several head of antiquities who never stayed long and who were focused only on the protection of Islamic monuments from the Egyptian Middle Ages time. Truly beautiful monuments from this time, actually, but they completely neglected anything that had to do with ancient Egypt, and of course, it's a shame. However, the current minister, who really stood out and undertook many actions, and who wants to reopen many sites, including new ones, I don't know how he does it. He must work day and night, because I've never seen a minister of antiquities work that much. When pillaging took place in the Malawi Museum, he was the first one to take measures. Terrorists threatened him. people working in the Antiquities departments in archaeology are extraordinary, very motivated, and do whatever they can to bring the situation back to normal and make sure the sites open to the public are protected. Of course, there has been pillaging and problems in the past 2 years, but more and more artifacts are recovered. New measures are taken to better protect the sites, and everything is restructured. Because a famous minister in the past didn't do much with his subsidies to protect well the sites.
Un ministre très connu dans le passé n'avait pas fait grand-chose des finances qui lui étaient allouées pour organiser une protection réelle de ces sites.
D'accord. So we can say it's very encouraging news. Will sites reopen and including new ones?
Oui, il y a des
Well, yes. For instance, the visit of the Rombo Idol Pyramid, the visit of the Serapeum, the visit of sites around Mena, which were closed to the public, and other sites as well. An enormous amount of work is done, but, simply, and since it's an emergency situation, stolen artifacts must first be recovered, including the ones that were shipped abroad, and strengthen what already exists. As a conclusion, what message would you like to send to the Egyptian people? Well, I think they are the ones who are sending out the message with their courage and their determination and their intelligence as well in this critical situation that they are facing with real effectiveness, and let us not forget, for all of us. So they are the ones sending out the message, but my message would be long live Egypt, and may this magnificent country continue on its path. And this will be the final word. Thanks again, Gigal, for this interview. Thank you.